What if the future was not made of hope but of horror? What if the cold corridors of science labs hid something worse than death? Between the 70s and 80s, a handful of films dared to blend technology and terror so brutally that theaters refused to touch them. These are the sci-fi horror hybrids that shocked even seasoned audiences. Let us descend into the nightmares that science created. Number 12. The Manitou, 1978. Few films captured the occult mixed with science as brazenly as the Manitou. It arrived at the tail end of the 70s, promising cosmic terror and medical madness. Audiences were not ready. The story begins with a woman who develops a tumor that grows faster than life itself. Doctors believe it is cancer, but inside that swelling, something ancient awakens. A Native American shaman reborn through flesh within a hospital bed. Imagine sterile, white corridors turning into ritual chambers, machines whirring beside flickering candles. As the entity grows, it infects the technology around it, twisting science into sorcery. The climax defies logic. Computers pulse with energy, and an ancient spirit hurls lightning across hospital walls. Critics called it ridiculous, yet unforgettable. Controversy hit fast. Some theaters refused to screen it, fearing backlash from both spiritual communities and hospitals. The mix of tribal mysticism and modern medicine was seen as sacrilege. Religious groups protested, saying it mocked sacred rituals. Studio executives panicked, slashing promotional budgets and burying the film overseas. Behind the scenes, Tony Curtis fought to keep the tone serious, while directors leaned toward cosmic chaos. The clash created an atmosphere of real madness on set. When it finally premiered, audiences either walked out laughing or stayed frozen in awe. Decades later, the Manitou found redemption among cult fans. They saw it not as camp, but as a strange prophecy about science trespassing on the divine. Its legacy survives as a warning. Sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not born from space, but from the illusions of healing. Number 11. Xtro, 1982. When Xtro hit British theaters, it felt less like a movie and more like a virus. Advertised as the film too shocking for America, it delivered on that threat. It told the story of a father abducted by aliens who returns 3 years later, changed into something unrecognizable. What followed was an eruption of biological horror wrapped in family tragedy. The tone was bleak, the imagery even bleaker. Birth scenes that made audiences faint, transformations that looked painfully real. Critics called it perverse, but filmmakers called it visionary. Director Harry Bromley Davenport was not interested in space battles or sleek ships. He wanted horror that crawled under the skin. Every frame oozed dread. Censors hated it. The British Board of Film Classification demanded cuts, claiming it blurred the line between art and indecency. Countries banned it outright. In the United States, distributors refused to handle it, fearing outrage similar to The Exorcist. Yet underground video stores made it a legend. Copies circulated through back rooms and late-night screenings. Behind the camera, the production was chaos. Low budgets forced the crew to build alien effects from household items and raw meat. Cast members remember the set reeking of chemicals and fear. Even the director later admitted he might have gone too far, but that extremity gave it life. Xtro became a rite of passage for horror fans who wanted something forbidden. Its sequels tried to tame the madness, but never matched its raw energy. In the end, the film stood as a brutal statement on alienation and family decay. The message was clear. Sometimes the monsters that return home are still human on the outside, but hollow within. Number 10. The Brood, 1979. Before scanners and Videodrome. David Cronenberg crafted a deeply personal nightmare called The Brood. At first, it looked like another clinical horror about psychology and experimental therapy. Then it revealed something far darker. A woman undergoing radical treatment begins to externalize her rage in physical form. Her emotions become creatures. Her pain becomes birth. Critics were stunned. The violence felt emotional, not sensational. Small, deformed children attacked victims in silence, leaving behind carnage that mirrored the protagonist's broken psyche. For Cronenberg, it was art born from his own divorce and custody battle. That intimacy made it unbearable to watch. Censorship boards across Europe called it obscene. The depiction of motherhood and monstrosity offended viewers who could handle blood, but not symbolism. Even in North America, distributors hesitated, unsure how to market it. Was it science fiction? Was it psychological drama, or was it simply madness? On set, the mood was grim. Cronenberg insisted on absolute control. Actors recalled his detached direction as if he were studying them like test subjects. Crew members whispered that the director himself was haunted by what he had created. When The Brood finally premiered, reactions split violently. Some critics hailed it as genius, while others called it misogynistic filth. Yet time reshaped its reputation. Modern audiences see it as one of the first films to weaponize science fiction against the institution of family. Today, The Brood stands as a warning about emotion turned into experiment. It is horror, born from intellect and grief, the kind of story that bleeds both ways. It asks the most frightening question of all. What if science could manifest our rage into flesh? Number 9. The Thing, 1982. When John Carpenter unleashed The Thing, theaters recoiled. What began as a remake of a 1950s sci-fi classic turned into an autopsy of paranoia. Set in the frozen isolation of Antarctica, it followed a crew of researchers hunted by a shape-shifting organism that could imitate any living being. The result was pure dread. No hero, no safety, just suspicion in human form. Critics hated it. Audiences fled. Universal released it the same summer as E.T., and people preferred warmth over nihilism. Newspapers called it sick. Reviewers described it as pornographic violence. But here was the truth. Carpenter's version was not about gore. It was about trust, disintegrating in the face of survival. Every effect, every scream, came from the fear of not knowing who was real. Behind the scenes, chaos was constant. The animatronics leaked fluid. Latex froze in the cold. Kurt Russell nearly lost consciousness during stunt explosions. Carpenter spent sleepless nights defending Rob Bottin's effects against studio pressure. The studio wanted less horror, more science. Carpenter refused. He chose fear over formula. When censors saw the finished cut, they demanded tone adjustments, fearing mass walkouts. Carpenter stood his ground. The backlash ruined his confidence for years. Yet time turned the verdict. Critics now call it one of the greatest sci-fi horrors ever made. Every frame sweats mistrust. Every scream echoes our own fear of imitation. The Thing did not fail. It simply arrived too early. Its legacy remains chilling. In a world of identity and infection, it whispered that evil might not come from space, but from within the people we trust. Number 8. Altered States, 1980. Ken Russell was never known for restraint, and Altered States proved it. It promised scientific revelation, but delivered cosmic lunacy. The film followed a Harvard scientist obsessed with discovering humanity's primal origin. His tool was sensory deprivation and hallucinogenic drugs. What he found was an evolutionary rewind that transformed him into something less than human. At release, critics were divided. Some hailed it as intellectual horror, others called it incoherent madness. The imagery was hypnotic, human bodies dissolving into light, skulls cracking open to reveal primordial life. It was science fiction turned inward, a voyage into the origin of fear itself. Controversy surrounded the screenplay. Writer Paddy Chayefsky wanted control over his story, but Russell refused to soften its insanity. Their feud became Hollywood legend. Chayefsky removed his name from the credits. Studios panicked, fearing that the surreal imagery would be misread as drug propaganda. During test screenings, audiences walked out dazed. Some reported nausea, others claimed euphoria. The Motion Picture Association nearly slapped it with an adults-only rating. The studio trimmed scenes but could not silence its chaos. Behind the camera, the production teetered between genius and disaster. Russell pushed actors to emotional extremes, forcing William Hurt to scream until his voice collapsed. Every sequence felt like an experiment on both cast and viewer. Decades later, Altered States gained cult recognition as the ultimate mind science film. Its violence is intellectual, but its horror primal. It asks one unshakable question. If science could strip away everything human, would we recognize what was left? Number 7. Inseminoid, 1981. Few titles caused as much outrage in Britain as Inseminoid. Marketed as a low-budget alien imitation, it became a scandal instead. Shot in freezing caves, the film told the story of a female archaeologist impregnated by a mysterious creature during an expedition on a distant planet. What followed was a descent into psychosis and slaughter. The plot seemed simple: Yet, its execution was unrelenting. The lead actress, Judy Geeson, delivered a performance so intense that even the crew felt unsettled. The creature effects were crude but disturbing. The film's atmosphere reeked of dread and claustrophobia. Censors erupted in fury. The British Board of Film Classification nearly banned it, calling it exploitative and dangerous. Distributors argued that beneath the shock lay a metaphor for violation through science and exploration. The debate reached Parliament, where it was cited as proof that independent cinema had gone too far. On-set conditions were brutal. Actors froze inside caves. Lights failed constantly. Director Norman J. Warren fought exhaustion while tabloids stalked the production. Rumors spread that certain scenes caused fainting during previews. The press labeled it filth, disguised as fantasy. Yet Inseminoid endured. Underground screenings kept it alive. By the late 80s, it gained a cult following among feminist film theorists who interpreted it as a grim satire of male fear toward female power. What was dismissed as trash became a case study in psychological inversion. Its legacy lingers like a dark echo. It warned that science fiction's greatest horror is not what we discover out there, but what we awaken inside ourselves. Number 6, Event Horizon, 1997. Though released at the edge of a new century, Event Horizon carried the brutal spirit of 70s and 80s sci-fi horror. It was a vision of space as hell itself. The story followed a rescue crew sent to investigate a lost starship that had reappeared after vanishing beyond a black hole. What they found was not physics, but damnation. At first glance, it looked like a typical space thriller. Then the ship's log revealed scenes of madness and self-destruction. The Event Horizon had gone somewhere beyond space and brought back something alive. Director Paul W.S. Anderson filled every corridor with dread. Walls pulsed with blood. Voices whispered in dead languages. Even the air seemed haunted. The controversy was immediate. Test audiences fainted. Paramount demanded heavy cuts. Early versions reportedly contained scenes too horrific for release. Critics accused it of being torture disguised as science. Religious groups protested its depiction of hell in outer space, calling it sacrilege. Behind the scenes, production spiraled out of control. Studio deadlines forced Anderson to deliver a rushed edit. The missing footage became legend. Rumors claimed it was destroyed to prevent scandal. Actors described the filming as emotionally draining. The cold sets the stench of smoke machines and the screaming took their toll. When it finally hit theaters, it bombed. Audiences were not ready for a space movie that treated technology as damnation. Yet over time, Event Horizon rose from the wreckage. Modern fans hail it as a bridge between cosmic horror and science fiction. Its influence stretches through countless games and films. It endures because it asks a question too terrifying to ignore. What if the universe itself has a soul and it is not merciful? Number 5, Videodrome, 1983. David Cronenberg struck again, but this time he aimed straight at the television screen. Videodrome was not just a film, it was a hallucination about media and mutation. It followed Max Wren, a sleazy TV executive who discovers a pirate broadcast filled with violence. The more he watches, the more his reality warps. Flesh fuses with metal. Screens breathe. The signal infects the human mind. Critics did not know what to make of it. Some called it genius, others called it madness. The imagery was grotesque. A living VHS slot in the abdomen, weapons merging with human tissue. It was science fiction as psychosis. Censors nearly banned it, fearing that viewers would imitate its content. Networks refused to air trailers. Behind the camera, Cronenberg fought constant studio interference. Executives wanted less gore. He argued that the violence was symbolic. The budget shrank. Effects artists worked through nights creating pulsating televisions and twitching wounds from latex and hydraulic pumps. The result was pure nightmare fuel. When released, it failed commercially. Audiences could not understand what they had seen. But among underground circles, Videodrome became scripture. It predicted our obsession with screens decades before smartphones existed. It whispered that technology would not just inform us, but consume us. Today, its message feels prophetic. The line between media and reality has blurred. The film's slogan, "Long live the new flesh," became a cultural omen. Cronenberg turned body horror into philosophy. He showed that evolution might not come from biology, but from the machines we worship. Number 4, The Hidden, 1987. Part cop thriller, part alien invasion. The Hidden was too violent for mainstream audiences, yet too smart for the grindhouse crowd. It opened with a quiet banker suddenly robbing a store before going on a blood-soaked rampage. Soon, detectives discovered the truth. A parasitic alien was jumping between human hosts, turning ordinary people into unstoppable killers. It looked like a sci-fi version of the Terminator, but with a dark twist. The enemy could be anyone. There was no machine, no monster to fight, only a borrowed body. Director Jack Shoulder crafted it like a fever dream of 80s excess, car chases, rock music, and sudden bursts of carnage filled the screen. Censors balked at the violence. The studio demanded cuts to scenes of dismemberment and body swapping. Critics dismissed it as tasteless, yet audiences who found it on VHS recognized its genius. It was satire disguised as slaughter. The aliens' taste for money and fast cars mirrored human greed. Production stories were chaotic. The creature effects leaked glue across the floor. Actors had to stay motionless for long prosthetic shots. Michael Nouri and Kyle MacLachlan delivered performances of eerie restraint, as if they too feared contamination. With time, The Hidden earned cult status. It became known as the thinking man's action horror. Hidden beneath explosions lay a question that echoed through decades. If evil could move from person to person without shape or motive, could we ever truly know when it was gone? Its legacy remains buried but alive. A reminder that horror does not always crawl from shadows. Sometimes it drives the car next to you. Number 3, Lifeforce, 1985. When director Tobe Hooper teamed up with the writers of Alien, audiences expected another space thriller. What they got instead was Lifeforce, a fever dream that combined cosmic horror and apocalyptic prophecy. It began with astronauts discovering a derelict alien ship hidden within Halley's Comet. Inside, they found 3 perfectly preserved humanoids who appeared harmless. Once brought to Earth, they unleashed something worse than death. These beings did not kill for blood. They drained life energy itself, leaving victims as shriveled husks. Cities fell silent. Governments panicked. London became a graveyard of glassy-eyed corpses. It was space vampirism on a scale no one had imagined. Upon release, audiences were stunned. Critics called it insane and indecent. The special effects were mesmerizing, yet grotesque. Bodies exploded in storms of blue light. Souls seemed to burst from flesh. The Motion Picture Association tried to tone down scenes of horror, but Hooper refused. He wanted beauty and destruction to coexist. The film's production was infamous for chaos. The studio clashed with Hooper over tone and length. The original cut ran over 2 hours, filled with surreal cosmic visions. Executives butchered it for theaters, turning art into spectacle. It flopped in America, but exploded in Europe, where audiences recognized its ambition. In the decades that followed, Lifeforce evolved from ridicule to reverence. Scholars hailed it as a forgotten masterpiece about addiction and entropy. Fans adored its fearless scale. It stood as proof that science fiction could reach for both the heavens and the abyss. Its final message echoed through the genre. Humanity's thirst for discovery might one day awaken something that hungers back. Number 2, Possession, 1981. Few films in history are as unsettling as Andrzej Zulawski's Possession. It is not just horror, it is emotional collapse filmed through the lens of science and madness. The story follows a married couple in Berlin whose relationship implodes when the wife begins behaving erratically. Her secret is unspeakable. She is nurturing a creature that grows as her love dies. At release, Possession detonated controversy. Critics called it obscene. Religious groups called it blasphemous. Governments banned it in several countries, including the United Kingdom. The infamous hallway scene with actress Isabelle Adjani writhing in agony became cinematic legend. Yet behind the hysteria was a film about emotional mutation. The production itself was nightmarish. Zulawski pushed his cast to breakdowns. Sam Neill later admitted he left the set haunted. The creature effects by Carlo Rambaldi blurred lines between human and inhuman. Even the soundtrack throbbed with sickness. Audiences did not know how to process it. Was it sci-fi? Was it demonic horror? Was it simply insanity captured on film? For years it vanished, cut to ribbons by censors. Then art house festivals resurrected it in its uncut form. Critics reevaluated it as a metaphor for Cold War paranoia and personal trauma. Today, Possession stands as one of the most brutal love stories ever made. Its horror lies not in monsters, but in transformation. It shows what happens when emotion mutates into biology. When the heart becomes an experiment, it is cinema as psychological dissection. The pain feels almost divine. Number 1. Alien, 1979. No film defined sci-fi horror like Ridley Scott's Alien. It began as a modest space thriller, but became a cultural nightmare. The story of the crew of the Nostromo who intercept a distress signal and awaken a creature that defies biology is now legend. But in 1979, it was too much for most audiences to bear. The tension was relentless. Silence replaced music. Fear replaced dialogue. Every corridor dripped with sweat and darkness. The creature itself was both sexual and mechanical. Born from H.R. Giger's twisted imagination, it embodied the fear of contamination and birth. When the chestburster scene erupted into history, people fainted in theaters. Some theaters stopped screenings altogether. Censorship battles followed. TV networks refused trailers. Critics accused the film of being too sadistic, too nihilistic. Yet behind the outrage was artistry. Scott treated horror with surgical precision. The crew were not heroes. They were workers caught in a biological trap. Behind the camera, conditions were punishing. The alien suit stank of latex and heat. Actors endured endless takes and claustrophobic sets. Sigourney Weaver's fear was real. When the creature first appeared, none of the cast knew what to expect. The shock on screen was genuine. In the years since Alien became mythology, it birthed sequels, comics, and philosophies. It showed that terror could live in technology, that science could betray us, and that survival might come at the cost of humanity itself. Its legacy endures not as entertainment, but as revelation. The monster was never just alien, it was us. Science gave birth to monsters, and cinema dared to show their faces. These films were warnings disguised as nightmares. Each one revealed what happens when curiosity outpaces morality. From the Manitou to Alien, they turned laboratories into graveyards. Which of these brutal visions still haunts you? Tell us below. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories the theaters could not contain.